Room 306. Every story has a beginning. Brown Palace Hotel. Every story has a beginning. In a way, room 306 started in another hotel. A special place tucked away on the streets of Denver. A hotel that was built in 1892 of sandstone and red granite. Its odd distinctive triangular shape and being dubbed as one of America's first fireproof structures. Past guests include the unsinkable Molly Brown. She stayed at the hotel only a week after the Titanic disaster. Infamous Denver crime boss Jefferson Soapy Smith, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, just before becoming the president of the new Republic of China, Queen Marie of Romania, and the Beatles. Presidential guests include William Taft, Warren Harding, Harry S. Truman, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton. The hotel was the site of the high-profile 1911 murders in which Frank Henwood shot and killed Sylvester Louis Tony Von Fuel, and accidentally killed an innocent bystander, George Copeland, in the hotel's Marble Bar. Henwood and Von Fuel were rivals for, or shared, the affections of Denver socialite Isabel Springer, the wife of wealthy Denver businessman and political candidate John W. Springer. The murders culminated in a series of very public trials. The history and mystery behind the Brown Palace Hotel remains publicly hidden, but that's another story. I was down on my luck and needed a gig. A good friend of mine noticed I was on the edge and was able to pull some strings with Reader's Digest. As luck had it, they needed a ghost writer to cover a number of hotels in Denver. Their star travel reporter had fallen ill from a horrible case of food poisoning he had picked up at a rather upscale hotel in New York. I am not going to point any fingers, but if you head up to New York on a vacation, don't eat the clams. That is, unless you're from there. So luck once again had placed a handful of American Express travelers' checks in my pocket, some food in my belly and my ass on a Greyhound. I refused to fly, as it would be I have only been on a plane once and that was well against my will. A few months before, and maybe one of the reasons why I was in the state that I was in. A good friend of mine had passed away. He was an admitted reader and a Stephen King fan. We're talking a real paperback junkie here. 4 months after he consumed The Shining, he was seated with fantasies of the Stanley Hotel. His one request was to have his ashes spread somewhere in Colorado. I personally never had planned to carry this out, but circumstances took me by the hand, and in my backpack was a small Ziploc bag full of my friend's ashes. Normally I am in another world when I am on a Greyhound, but something was off about this whole trip. Passengers made little noise, the overall mood felt colder than normal, and at times I found that people were staring at me. A few times I even got up and made my way to the back of the bus and hid for a moment in the restroom. Sometimes I wonder, when bad people die, do they ride a Greyhound into hell? Souls in a perpetual state of movement. Add 2 more heads to the Greyhound and you have Cerberus. Just saying. Upon arriving at the Denver bus terminal, I was met by a few normal creatures attempting to sell me drugs and fake gold necklace. These were always friendly faces, as I knew I had made it safely to wherever I was going, and now I had to wade through the jungle or swamp that fate's funhouse wheel had decided to pick for me. To add to the series of strange events that was about to transpire, once I had flagged down one of Denver's yellow cabs and gave the balding middle-aged man named Lawrence my directions. I about stabbed myself with an awl that was carefully hidden in the back seat. Now if you don't know what a awl is, I understand, because I didn't either, and neither did my driver or how it got there. According to him, I was the first in his cab all day, after a careful investigation at the massive bar in the Brown Hotel. The bartender told me it was a tool used to punch leather or to pierce wood or some type of hide. To stack on my fear, he also told me a story about a woman named Lindy. She was in charge of the maid staff here at the Brown during the 1940s. According to him, something snapped in her head, because one of the maids would test her daily, public regulations and current views on how women should be dressed for work. Required carefully fitted uniforms. The maid would allow her apron to drag the ground as she performed her morning rounds. One day Lindy caught the woman off guard. She knocked her to ground with a glass ashtray. Back then every room at the Brown had one, and took a awl and sewed the women's apron onto her body with her own hair. She then left the maid in a pool of her own blood and made her way to the 22nd floor and jumping out of one of the room windows to the street below. The bar was called the Ship Tavern in 1935, as a celebration of the repeal of Prohibition in the United States. Denver architect Alan Fisher designed the Ship Tavern, one of 4 restaurants and bars inside the Brown Palace. This hotel offered more than any hotel I had been in. People were talkative and friendly. The place had history, and I honestly thought this would be the highlight of my trip. Reader's Digest and their monthly readers loved it from what I was told. As the haunted stories filled the pages of the digest, we started to see groups flock here in search of things I had written about. The Sci-Fi Channel even done a ghost hunt there. I couldn't be sure if it was due to my time there, but in my mind it had an impact. During the day I would sleep, and then I would head down once it got dark and lurk around the bars and order a few drinks and chat it up with some of the other guests. This is when I met a couple that had just come from the Stanley Hotel. Memories of conversations filled my head from the past, the ones with my dead friend. The couple said if you found yourself at the Stanley, stay in room 306. Management liked to rent out the haunted rooms, but they didn't like to rent out this one. When I asked why, they said this is where Stanley killed his wife. I knew my history, or at least I thought I did, about the steam-powered car inventor Freelan Oscar Stanley. After all, I had written a few papers on him back in school and had numerous conversations about him with my friend. What I learned was his wife passed away from a heart attack in Newton, Massachusetts, in 1939. Strangely, he died from the same ailment 1 year after. The couple smiled and then gave each other that look, you know, the one when someone want to tell someone they're wrong. The woman spoke up and began her story. He and Flora arrived in Denver in March and, in June, decided to spend the rest of the summer in the mountains, in Estes Park. Over the course of the season, Stanley's health improved dramatically. Impressed by the beauty of the valley and grateful for his recovery, he decided to return every year. He lived to the ripe age of 91, dying of a heart attack in Newton, Massachusetts, 1 year after his wife, in 1940. This is the official story. By 1907, Stanley had recovered completely. However, not content with the rustic accommodations, lazy pastimes, and relaxed social scene of their new summer home, Stanley resolved to turn Estes Park into a resort town. In 1907, construction began on the Hotel Stanley, a 48-room grand hotel that catered to the class of wealthy urbanites who composed the Stanley's social circle back east. The Stanleys found something special at Estes Parks, and young man, you're about to hear the strangest thing someone has ever told you. People that drink from the fountain hidden far back in the tunnels under the Stanley. Don't age, they get younger. For a moment I didn't say anything, then the word bullshit was conjured up from my larynx. The man looked down at his watch and said, honey, we got to go. He turned to me and said, it was a wonderful chat, believe us or not, sometimes you lose a little, and gain a lot. I got up a few moments after they left, making my way over to the bartender and ordering another Jack and Coke. I found myself asking him what he knew about the Stanley and if he has ever been. As he poured me another Jack and Coke, he responded, I know it's built on a very old Indian temple, in fact it was a burial ground for years before the Stanleys took it in a land grab. Something about this sent a chill down my back, or maybe it was the light tapping of a female finger on my shoulder. The lady that wiped the table down for the next guest, brought a set of old sunglasses over to me. Sir, you must have forgot these, they look old. Well, they're not mine. Maybe they belong to the people I was speaking with at the table. The lady frowned and said, sir, you were sitting alone, maybe you have had too much. No ma'am, I don't think I have drunk enough to be in Denver. For the next few hours I stared at the old sunglasses, drinking Jack and Coke, and thought about the Stanley Hotel.